Anderson will not be able to take notes. I can take notes up until 7:30, and then I will pass it to you, pass the baton to you if we.
Are you doing it in a shared file so I can just pick up where you left off?
It's too thick to be.
I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how to use that very well.
Okay.
Do you know how to use it?
She sends it to me all the
Can
time.
you just send it to me and then
Yeah,
I'll
I'll just
start?
make a shared, yep.
There isn't an official agenda because it's only the budget.
No worries, I'll just make a shared document really quickly between the three of us.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I won't be able to stay very long, but I'll stay as long as I can.
Thank you.
So why don't we, right now, come up with an end time that works for everyone?
Okay.
Instead of,
6:40.
I'm in.
yes.
It's 7:15.
If two people are leaving early.
I can give you guys until 7:30.
See, I'm
7:30. All
Okay.
right,
I'm here till 7:30 also.
all right, let's just plan on 7:30, but let's get started then.
Okay.
And then we don't have to worry about that shared file because she's staying till 7:30.
Okay.
So let's go. Sorry,
waiting.
I took over. Sorry.
So I guess the first thing is, it's just the budget. Kirsten sent it out to all of us. I always call her first name because I'm very squeamish about pronouncing her last name.
Vanderberg, as I'm pretty
Vanderberg,
sure.
Miss Vanderberg sent it out to us. And then Annalisa's proposed finance stuff. I sent you guys Braden's stuff also. The handouts for all the other things that we received. I did not receive anything from Police Chief Sharan, but I think that he was, there wasn't a lot of additional pull from previous years or changes in his budget. Chief Fells gave his printout. So I guess it's just taking an overview of the 2023 budget and if there are any questions so that we can get moving on looking at it and push it through the council floor.
Are we just jumping into questions?
Yep.
Okay. I have a couple, if anybody else doesn't want to start.
Okay,
I have
Kirsten
one,
isn't
I
here,
have
so
one
I'm-
minor request, that we try to do this in order
Okay,
and not jump around through a million pages and everybody gets lost.
okay.
So can we try to
then
stay on, sorry, try to stay on
Then the
page
best
one?
thing, and I would say then, is that to kind of just go where your question is. If you're on page one, say you're on page one, move on, versus trying to bounce back and forth so we can follow it from start to finish.
Perfect.
And I'm just taking notes, so I'm not probably gonna be saying much, so
And I would suggest we go by department, like Department Police 101, because if you go by pages, they're not numbered.
They're not numbered, but I know how to number.
Yep, that's fine with me.
all right, well,
So I just have a few questions on the first page, the police department. And it's probably self-explanatory, but for the life of me, Ron, I can't remember how it all works. So, and I'm just looking at the ammo, because that seems to be the easiest one. So we budgeted 4,000 last year. We spent 814,000, and so we're going to budget another 4,000 this year, is what it looks like.
Maybe I didn't hear your numbers right. You said we budgeted 8,000 or 4,000?
No, budgeted 4,000 last year.
And then you said we spent
And
814?
it looks like the year-to-date expense is 814.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And
I thought you meant 1,000. Okay.
Yeah, no.
All right.
So now, and so we're just going to rebudget again 4,000.
Correct.
Okay. Then the other question that it kind of bothers me because me and the leases, I just am still getting used to all that. The vehicle repair and maintenance, we had budgeted 18,000. We've only spent 13,000 so far this year. But what what was that maintenance be on?
It would be on the other vehicles that we have, which would be everything from tires. There are, accidents sometimes that we have. We do have certain major engine issues. I can't remember which car specifically, but I do know that there was a transmission issue that we had in one. So they just accumulate because, of course, those cars are older.
Yeah, right. And,
So-
and as soon as you said tires, it's like, oh, I remember. And then the car that sits out in the parking lot. So I had a conversation with one of the council members, and I believe that when we acquired that, we had to put money into that.
We didn't really, so to be very clear, the Infinity that is sitting out front was a forfeiture by the police that was acquired. It was a car that was acquired by the police department from a forfeiture.
Right.
Excuse me. It was transferred to Public Works. And at that point, there were just some new tires put on, and then that was it.
Okay. All right, thanks. And that's all I have until I get to another page, so.
Anybody have questions from, I'll say first page for not really having page numbers?
I just have like a general question. First is like police incidents, trying to see where the line is. Here, like almost more than halfway down, police incidents. 500 was budgeted. Year to date, we spent 237, but then you guys increased it to 1,000. Is there a reason you guys are increasing it? Just curious.
I think those are incidentals.
Sorry, incidentals.
That's okay. No, the only reason that we would have increased it is just because that would cover literally what it says, incidentals, issues that may, or things that may come up that we may not be, that may not be covered under any other.
Right. Yeah, I get what the line
yeah.
item
So
means.
we're,
but
yeah,
I
so
didn't know if there
basically
was-
the 1,000 I think is within reason. It's not really
Yeah.
a significantly a greater amount.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, quite frankly, the police chief really stayed within his range, so there may have been some numbers in there that he shifted based on what he felt the need was. So
Right.
that would really be it.
Got it. Thank you.
I'm
Madam
sorry,
Chair.
can you tell me what your question was, because I missed your
I
question.
was just curious of what the increase in police incidentals was for, and he just said just for general increase, I guess, whatever they need.
I have a question also, please.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Mosby, I'm just curious. Online, it's 524051 towards the bottom. Why is this year, why is the ammunition for police, why is that line empty? There's nothing there but dashes.
I think it's just a typo.
No, it's probably in the police levy.
Oh, well,
Yes.
because no, police ammunition is up here as well. So it looks like it was just accidentally doubled, is what I'm guessing.
Oh, I
Well,
see
it
it now.
may not have been doubled. That brings up another point.
It's not the
When we
same
deal with
number.
CMI, there were certain numbers that were put into the CMI system, and so some of those could have been duplicates. And if there were duplicates, as Ms. Anderson just said, we're not putting double amounts in there.
I
We
see it-
have
I see
the
it at
ammunition, right.
I see it at
So-
the top. I was looking at it at the bottom. Okay, thank you.
It's like,
I
it's
see
like
it.
the pool that's always in
Correct,
there.
yes, that's a great point, right? So
Exactly.
you can't, once it's in, you can't take it out.
Yeah,
It's
right.
like luggage. Once you get it, you never
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
Okay,
I have a
thank you.
question.
Yes.
I'm looking at line, I guess we're going by the last numbers, so I'm going to say it's dispatch fees, 523230. So I guess 2020 actual, that was what they spent in 2020, is that correct?
Yes,
And then 2021 actual is what they spent in 2021, right?
yes.
And then year-to-date in 2022, that's like right up until maybe through October, doesn't include November, doesn't include December.
It's probably more like the end of September
Okay.
is probably what you're looking at.
All right, so I guess I'm not well,
So I can explain something with
Okay.
so that's that's another good question. So when Hamilton County, when they looked at their tax budget, one of the things that they did was they ended up lowering, because we had an increase in sales tax, they lowered the cost to the municipalities of the dispatch fee. So they actually were going down. And so now we still we get money, but of course then we have to pay out money. But our expenses, our disbursements have not been as high because they did lower the fees.
okay, so to that end, I have a question that's sort of budget related, but not, maybe if I'm going too far afield, somebody just stop me. A Cincinnati police officer responded when someone called the North College Hill non-emergency line. How did that happen?
I don't know. I'll be honest with you, especially if it was a non-emergency, because we only have, that line only goes to our office if it's the non-emergency line. So only the day clerk would answer, or we have night clerk. So I don't know how a Cincinnati police officer would have that number.
Okay.
Now, I will say this, and I'm not sure, I have no idea about the situation, right?
Right.
But I do know that many people, you know this too, tend to confuse College Hill and North College Hill. And
Right,
so,
well, this individual did not,
okay,
would
well,
not.
that we would
but-
not have a Cincinnati police officer answering our non-emergency line.
Well, it was just a Cincinnati police officer responded to an address in North College Hill for a North College Hill situation. I was just wondering how that happened, if it had something to do with dispatch. That's kind of how.
Oh, that's a different question. Okay, so you had said it was a non-emergency, so that's why I answered the question the way I did. Well, again, I
Could it be
wouldn't,
that
I'd
she
have to
called
find the facts. I
911
just wouldn't
instead?
know. I wouldn't
Like,
know.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I'll figure that out another day. Okay, thank you.
I have a question, I can't, I'm sorry. Did you
I'll
have
wait
one?
for you to, I'll wait.
I gotta find it again. Oh, here it is. The cell phones and pagers, I'm curious why we haven't paid any money towards that yet this year.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at. There are a few line items like that where we haven't like spent any money year to date, but we're still budgeting for it.
No, in some cases, and I'd have to see specifically, of course, we do have, excuse me, I'm sorry. Police chief has a cell phone, and then, of course, our duty phone is a cell phone. It's, in some cases, some of the disbursements may have been from other lines, and of course, as we do the cleanup ordinance at the end of the year, adjustments are made. So I don't specifically know which line you were referring to, but it is possible that some of them may have come from a different line, and we would just make the adjustment at the end of the year.
So a different line, we would have paid it out of a different line?
Correct. It could have been. I mean, again, I'm not 100% certain because I don't have the receipts in front of me, but it could happen that way.
I see what you're saying.
I don't.
He's saying we still like use the monies. But-
So at no point throughout the 9 months when this was accumulated, we didn't pay a cell phone bill in 9 months. Is that's what that's telling me? Or we paid it out of a wrong line item? Is that,
So did we pay a cell phone bill or anything for cell phones or pagers this year?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So why didn't it come out of this line item?
Again, it could have been paid from a different line item.
But why would that have happened? I think it's
Just because there are, first of all, when the police chief is going through the invoices, he would determine at times when he would want certain things to be paid out of different appropriations. That happens. It has happened. It happens all the time. That's why we have the end of the year for them to make the adjustment if that is necessary.
Okay.
So there's some level of confusion still in my mind to say, why would we have a line that specifically says cell phones and pagers, and yet, for example, they would pay that out of the ammunition line?
Like, why would they do that?
He could do it for any number of reasons. One could be a simple mistake in terms of in terms of a digit. Another reason could because he might see at the time that that certain funds that may be in a particular appropriation may have more at that particular time. I can't give you a specific reason for that. Again, when those things do happen, they are typically either corrected at the end of the year when we do what we call the cleanup budget, which Ms. Zorb, I know you're very familiar with, or at times, if it's necessary, they may make some adjustments throughout the year. In this case, I know that, as Ms. Anderson said, our cell phones and phone bills are paid, but I don't know specifically which line item that they came out of. Like that part, I wouldn't be able to tell you right off the top of my head. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
I'm just trying to understand kind of how this works. It's like looking at another language, honestly. So if I look at salaries, professional, right? And if I look under 2022 year-to-date, it says 10,469. That can't be right.
So
Before we do that, I just want to make sure, are you clear with your question?
I understand my question, and I understand the answer that was provided. What I don't understand is why, from my perspective, it looks like inaccuracies. So it looks like even if a cell phone bill was submitted, it was paid for out of the incorrect line. And I'm not an accountant, but to me, that looks like that's an inaccuracy.
Okay, so then
And that's where my confusion lies.
I'll ask the question. For auditing purposes, are we permitted to do things like that?
they do it all the time. Every municipality does it. What is not typically done, if I may be quite honest, is most municipalities do not manage budgets at a line item level. They don't. It's simply typically what you would have is an activity level, which would show salaries and benefits and then administrative expenses. So everything would be under either one of those two major buckets. Then issues like what Ms. Zorb is bringing up, which is just simply an administrative issue. It really isn't there's nothing illegal about it. There's nothing, an audit person is not going to look at that and say, oh, it was paid out of, ammunition instead of such and such. They're going to look at to see are we staying within budget. That's what they
So
would
is
be
that the
looking at.
purpose of them doing that, so that they can stay within budget?
Doing what?
Taking funds that would be designated or whatever to like a cell phone and putting it in another appropriation to make sure that they're within budget?
It could be but again, I think the biggest concern would be at the end of the year, what we need to do is to make sure that all of our appropriations basically are at zero or greater. So when we're coming up on December, when that happens, we start to cut everything off. When I say cut everything off, what I mean is we stop making payments. The finance manager will then go through every line to see where they are. And if there are lines that are in the red, and I think this kind of leads up to the question So it's somewhat related to the question that Ms. Underwood was just asking. If there are necessary adjustments that need to be made, then that's when we would make them. So I go back to her question because she was asking about, for example, salaries. Now, of course, as in the police department, we have two primary buckets. One is a portion of the general fund is dedicated to the police department, and then, of course, the police department has a levy. So what happens is we use, or when they are making their payments for salaries, in order to simplify things, they may be taking monies, for example, from the levy or from the general fund. And at the end of the year, in order to make it balance, they will then transfer money from either one of those two buckets in order to make sure that things are in balance. And it's not there's nothing illegal about it. That is the way that they manage, for especially payroll funds, because we have to pay our employees.
I understand. I just was trying to make sure that we got the clarity on why it was being done. And I also understand that your position is that city council normally doesn't go through things line by line. And I do understand that. However, this is where we are, so I want to kind of put the explanation out there as to why that was being done and if that is feasible, because that does make it a little bit difficult to follow in the process that we're currently in. Like, I can understand why she may have had that question.
Well, I think the other thing is too, when you look at our police department, that takes up the greatest percentage of our general budget. Of our general fund, I'm sorry. And so there's a lot of activity that occurs. There's a lot of bills that have to be paid from that department on a daily, weekly basis. So if there are, and in some of those cases, some things could happen. For example, and these are just hypotheticals. I'm not trying to pick one that quote unquote actually happened, but let's just say, for example, they paid a lease payment. A lease payment was made, but it was made out of subscriptions instead of out of a lease payment. Okay, well, when they go back to do the final balance at the end of the year, they'll look at that and say, okay, well, we just need to make sure that we have enough money in this appropriation, and so they will make that adjustment. And that happens every year. I see Ms. DeWalt shaking her head because she understands that. It does. It happens every year. It's an administrative procedure. And what we need to do is just make sure that the actual, the entire activity level, in this case, the police department, we need to just make sure that that's all in the black, which that will happen.
Okay.
So that's why I'm saying that.
Ms. Underwood, I'm sorry. You had your salary question.
He answered it.
Okay. So I'm going to just say he answered the salary question because I don't know what the question was.
I'm just trying to understand what I'm looking at, so, okay.
No, I do understand that. Again, since we do have those two buckets, the police levy is a restricted fund. It can be used for nothing but that. Those funds are dedicated to the police department, and you'll see a larger beginning balance in that because that is the, I'm sorry, no, you won't. Oop, let me take that back. You'll actually see a larger amount in the general fund. But they may, just for ease of, ease of accounting, take all of the money out of, for example, salaries in the levy fund first, and then go to the general fund. But that happens all the time. It's not an unusual circumstance.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Next page.
Where are we on page, like, where?
We've only done the police. We're on fire. Fire and then service department, which service department's 0, so I don't think anybody should have any questions. Does anybody have questions on fire?
Can I know somebody's going to get mad or somewhere, but I'm going to ask this question again. So let's just say the police have a cell phone bill. Do they determine which line it gets paid out of, or is that determined at the finance level? Where
No,
is that
it's
decision
determined
made?
at the department level.
Thank you.
So I don't know if this is, I don't know if I understand it right, but I'm gonna take a shot. It seems like they just kind of stick it somewhere so that it comes out in the black at the end of the year. Was that right?
But then,
So that I understand that
But I have
that
different
doesn't
line
make
items.
then what
this
is
make much
this
sense.
about?
Right, why have different line items
Because
then?
that, well, I think if I can, I don't know, so I'm putting it out there for you guys to jump in on it. When we asked them to deliver for 2023, we asked them specifically to put the prior years on there. And so that those are there, but then that doesn't really help with assessing whether 2023 is based upon the previous year, because the previous year is not finished yet. And so we won't actually see actuals in some of those buckets because of that accounting thing that they do to stay in the black.
Madam Chair, may I
think
please?
that's-
Okay.
That didn't really
So if I
answer
can answer that question, because again, this goes back to what I've said before during my time here, that when you're trying to look at that budget on a line item basis, and you are correct, it's council's prerogative, but this is what happens. If we were doing it the way that I had mentioned before, which is you have the two primary buckets, which is your salaries and benefits and your administrative expenses, those things that Ms. Zorb is talking about would simply fall under administrative expenses. And then at the department level, which she was asking me about, they would be able to make the adjustments there as they typically need them. So that was precisely why I had said that, in the past. And as you, though rightly said, council had requested that they wanted to see the budget down to the line item level, so that's exactly what we did.
But what it would appear to me, from sitting in this seat, is although council has asked for this at a line item, it would appear that the departments are not doing it at a line item.
Right.
They-
That's what it looks like from this seat.
Okay, well, what I'm saying to you is, Ms. Zorb, what you want to know is, is each department staying within their administrative expenses? And if the answer to that question is yes, then that's it. I don't know that you would need to know, to be honest with you, how much they're spending on copier expense or how much they're spending on subscriptions or things like that. Those are administrative things that, as you asked earlier, the department head, he does need to know that because he's running the department. But as long as he's staying within the budget that you have given him, that is what is important for what council has, the directive that council has given us as administration.
But the other
And I-
side of that coin is, if we don't know what he needs, like legitimately, we don't know that he needs $4,000 for cell phones because he hasn't, according to this, he hasn't spent any money on cell phones.
But that isn't, but again, Ms. Zorb, what I'm saying to you is.
I can
he
only deal
needs
with what I
administrative-
see.
No, you can't. You can deal with, if you had a lump sum that said, this is how much the department needed for administrative expenses, you would be able to see that money, that number, whatever that number is. If that number is 780,000, then he would have to determine, he being Chief Schran, would have to determine how that 780,000 would be spent. And that is where those line item numbers tend to come in, and that's why they're important for him. For you, you need to see, is he meeting salary and benefits, and is he meeting administrative expenses?
And I think what you're trying to say, Ms. Zorb, and I'm just restating for clarity, kill me if I'm wrong, is that, and I just want to be transparent. I hear you saying, we don't need to look at it line by line, but we are looking at it line by line. So it does not yield to transparency when they're not putting things in the appropriate buckets to be able to measure whether or not those departments are, yes, they're staying within budget, but I think there's a little bit of ambiguity there to say that, okay, are they spending $6,000 a month on cell phones or $6,000 a year on cell phones, or are they spending $200 a month on cell phones?
Right.
And I don't want for both sides to get into a discussion about whether we should be looking at lines or we shouldn't be looking at lines. We were here.
Yeah, it
How
doesn't
do you
matter.
see it with this? And I'm saying, I don't think you can because of the way that they have always put it in different lines to make sure that it comes out in the black. I don't think that we can measure it, is what I'm saying. That would not give you the view that you're wanting.
You are right, but in my mind, I need this for justification, to know if they need 1.5 million or if they only need
I hear you. I was just getting to
$750,000.
what
I
is
don't know
happening.
what they need unless I see a justification. And to me, that's what this document, the line-by-line document, to me, is a justification document.
So I think in reviewing it this way, what we asked for this year, there's a bit of discovery that we hadn't seen before. And that is, I mean, because this practice didn't start today. It's
It's
been
always
going
been this
on.
way, but it's never been this horrible before.
Actually, it has, Ms. Zorb, and I sat on council when it was. So please do not misrepresent, because I was actually sitting on council when they did have to do a cleanup budget, and I actually had to take some time to explain it to some council members at the time to help them understand why this is not something that is out of the ordinary. It's done by every municipality at the end of every year. It happens all the time.
I think what she was saying is it hasn't been this unclear of what the year-to-date expenses are for each line item. I think that's what she was saying.
I understand the cleanup budget.
Yes, we
so
understand
yes.
that. But another thing too, I mean, if council as a whole wants to set a priority for training in our city, well, how can we know how much more we need to put towards training if we don't know how much was spent? So I think, I mean, I see exactly what Mary Jo's saying, but I don't see anything fruitful coming from this discussion. It happens every year. The one person doesn't want the line item, one person does. And it really doesn't matter because like Aria said, we're here. So if it's okay, I would like to move on to the fire, please.
I just want to chime in because to me, this seems like a colossal waste of time now that I understand how this works. And Ms. Zorb, thank you for because once she asked her question and Mr. Mosby explained kind of how this is all working, what I understand now is that this is like a living, breathing thing.
Yeah.
And what the department heads are doing is staying within their big budget and then at the end saying, this is how much we spend here, this is how much we spend here, this is how much we spend here, but they're not doing it at the beginning. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is a very accurate statement. That is a living, breathing document. It is very active, especially for the police and fire departments.
Okay,
They're-
so then
they're
there's no
having-
way
They're paying a lot of bills at,
I don't-
at several moments.
with
I
the
don't know if you guys
fluctuate,
remember
right?
me telling you this when we were deciding what would go into this document, that this is why we couldn't put the previous years on here, because we would not be able to see it translate. Our real accountability that you're wanting for judgment and is in their delivery when they present. We need to be asking them those things, those lines when they present their budgets individually.
But we don't get that full picture from them. This is a full picture. We see what happened in 2020.
it's
and
our
last year we
job.
saw from 2019 and up. And I think going by line would be a big mistake if we didn't do it.
I'm not advocating for or against it. I'm saying the way that this document is, and this is the document that we asked them for, you cannot see what you're hoping for. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that you're right in going line by line or wrong, or whoever. I'm saying you can't see what you're hoping for based on what we requested.
I disagree with that. This is exactly what, I want to see that historical
Yeah, I
number
agree.
in there. I feel like I have to have that in order to make a
Sound
Informed
decision.
decision.
yes, an
And I'm
informed decision.
saying that
But the problems that I'm having is in the year-to-date and the month-to-date. That's where because those aren't,
accurate.
as,
So there's a bit of more transparency that will come in the, what did you call it? The closeout?
Cleanup
Cleanup,
Clean up
in the
ordinance.
cleanup. That's where you'll get where those buckets actually came from.
so here's just one person's opinion. If this stuff was done more precisely to a line item throughout the year, the cleanup ordinance would be less.
That's not accurate again. You have
I mean, there's zero
hundreds
money in the
of
cell
transactions, Ms. Zorb, that happen on a daily, weekly basis. You would always need a cleanup ordinance, no matter what. You're always going to need it.
And I
I would say
was,
we wouldn't need it, I would say we'd need less.
I would say
That's what I
this,
said.
this is my, this is my first time hearing that from administration, not to say that it hasn't been happening, but I do know in the business sector, they pull from different line items all the time to make things look like they're in the black until they can actually be in the black. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense from an accounting standpoint, but it does happen often. I
Right, I
don't
get
know the
that.
right
I bet their
answer.
board approved it.
But exactly what you're saying though is what I think my issue is with it. Okay, so let's say they had way more cell phone bills this year than they budgeted for.
You wouldn't be able to see it.
We would want to see that. I get they want to look like they're in the black. I get that. We want to see though where they need to budget more money.
Then I think the answer to the question, or the answer to the transparency, not the question, would be to ask the department heads to give their actuals and what they've spent when they give their presentation. Because we have not yet asked them, they're delivering against what we asked them, administration is.
Well, if I may, so two things have come up. One I've already addressed with Ms. Underwood because she's very accurate. But the other that I believe that Ms. Anderson brought up is another very good point, which is one of the reasons for the budget is because she is correct. It is council's directive to the administration to say this is what we want to focus on. And I appreciated the fact that she used the training as an example, right? So if she says, or if council says, not you as an individual, I'm sorry, but if council says we want to emphasize training for all of our employees, and we want to make sure that that money is in the budget, right? Then that is what would be put in, and that would be council's prerogative to do that. So if council says we want to make sure that there's $10,000 of training in every department, then that's what would happen. Now we would have to work around that,
Right,
but
but
I
how-
think that's an excellent example.
Right, but how would we know how much to put in that line item if we do not have the expenses that it took last year? I feel like we're just running in circles and running in
I don't-
circles.
Because you
I don't
can't,
know
you
if
can,
there's
actually,
any
you can't
way-
base you cannot
You
base the
can,
budget
but if there's any way
on there.
to go to the next page, because I have a lot of questions and we have 15 minutes. So if there are no more questions on police, can we go to fire?
Yeah, if you guys want to put how we do this back on the Budget and Finance Committee for another date, we can do that.
Yes.
But to continue on for this, let's go ahead.
Yeah.
So we're at fire.
I have no questions under fire.
I'm sorry.
That's just the
service-
next thing.
Service debt,
You guys said you wanted to go by page, so I'm just going by page. I don't
Service debt.
personally have any questions.
But that's what you said.
Service department,
yeah,
we don't need to
No
talk
questions
about
on
that.
service.
okay. Recreation,
All right, I got questions. This is not specifically about recreation. Now that I'm looking at the full budget, this is actually about a lot of different pockets. So at the last budget meeting, you said, Ron, and I think maybe Kirsten also said this, maybe, we're in the red for 2022, but not by a lot. But I see that they're like specifically in recreation because, but in fire and different things like that would come out of the general fund, we have not spent and are not projecting to spend as much as we budgeted for. So I'm not quite sure why we would be in the red if we aren't spending as much as we budgeted for.
I don't remember saying that we were in the red. Can you refresh my memory? Of
Yeah,
what
at
I
the
would've
last
said then?
budget meeting, you said we will end 2022 in the red. I think
I don't
Kirsten maybe
remember
said
saying
it.
that.
She presented this number.
No,
This is
no.
what they're talking- I
Okay,
think that's
no,
what
no,
they're
no, no.
referring
Are you referring to this $40,000?
I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there was.
She's looking at the 2023 budget. Because we are not anticipated to end 2022 in the red.
I'm very confused then, because that's
Okay.
what somebody had said.
She's,
Am I the only one who remembers this? I might be. Okay. What are you looking at though? The 40,000? I don't know.
so on the 2023 budget, what Ms. Vanderberg had summarized was the projected revenue, total revenue, and then the projected total expense. And when you subtract the total expenses from the total revenue, the total expenses exceed the revenue by approximately $40,000.
Okay.
I didn't know if that, and then that's what Ms. Clear was,
Wait, so then that would be.
is that
where-
what you were referring to?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But wouldn't that mean that we were in the red by $40,000?
That would mean that we spent more than what we received, yes.
Right. So that would mean that we're in the red.
Well, we're not indebted, but we would be spending more because we would be bringing forth a surplus from the prior year. In other words, we had cash on hand that would be able to cover the 40,000.
Got it. Okay. That's all I needed to hear
Okay.
was that 40,000 is being covered.
Yes, okay, so thank you, for clarity, for everyone's clarity, by law, we are not allowed to operate at the end of the year in the red.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
That's what I knew, and so that's why I
Okay.
was, when she said that, I was like, whoa, that's really
No,
good. Okay.
and I, now that you mention it, I think Ms. Clear is absolutely correct. The $40,000 is just to show that what we project to spend exceeds what we project to come in. And again, for a reason, I had mentioned that, these past 2 years, 2021 and 2022, we received about $486,000 extra, and that was from the Recovery Act. That is money that we will not be receiving next year.
Got it.
So,
So actually, now that you said Recovery Act, does anybody have any questions about my previous statement? I have something for the Recovery Act.
I still have a question about the recreation.
I also do. Do you mind if
So
I ask
let's
the
stay-
Recovery Act question?
No,
really quick?
let's just stay on recreation. We'll do Recovery Act later, because we agreed to go page by page, so that's not.
Right. Is the Recovery Act in here, though?
Okay.
Because it wouldn't be in here, I don't think.
it would, and it's not going to show up. Again, part of it is in recreation, to be
Right.
totally
Okay.
honest with you.
That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So the Recovery Act funds at our last budget meeting, you also said that you can't show us what Recovery Act funds have been spent on. And then I was looking into it, and I saw that each municipality who gets Recovery Act funds has to report what they spend with that money, or what their expenses are with that money, like what they buy or what they use that money for. So if you had to report that, is there any way we could just see that report?
Now, I don't know that if you're talking about the Recovery Act funds or if you're talking about the CARES Act, because the CARES Act, we did have to report
Can we see that
those
report?
funds. Yeah, I mean, that is just something, but those were funds from 2020.
So we didn't spend any CARES Act money in 2022 at all?
No.
Okay. So is there any report at all for what the Recovery Act, what any money was spent?
Well, the only monies that we would have spent was the monies that are in the budget, which is what I was talking about. So when you said that, we don't know. The answer to your question is, we did not, although we separated it out as a receipt,
Right.
it was included, the
In the
funds are
general?
included in the general budget.
Right, so it was
So
just
that's
thrown
why I
in.
said, yes, so that's why I said, for example, the $200,000 that you saw that was in recreation,
Right.
that is where that was coming from.
Right.
The same thing with, and I did explain this, the same thing with the comprehensive plan. That money to pay for that was used out of the Recovery Act. Now, I'll give you another example. The $70,000 that was used for, in essence, for the impound lot was part of the additional money that we gave to the police department through those acts, and that's why I said it that way.
Got it. That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Do you want to ask your questions about recreation? I feel like I've talked a lot.
What's
Mary, do you want?
we said the CARES Act, and what was the other one?
Recovery Act
Recovery Act.
and CARES Act.
Thank you. Sorry.
I just,
CARES was COVID. That just to be
yeah.
clear.
Right.
I'll probably remember the answer once you tell me. But, and this is in recreation, so it was budgeted $200,000 under the contracted services, and we spent $121,000. But then for the proposed, we're only asking for $2,500.
Because it's not
It's not contracted?
the $200,000 in a perfect world would have been capital. It would not have been under OpEx. So the 2,500 is operating. That is legit going to be, like if I hire somebody to come teach a mixology class.
Okay.
That's what that would be. So the 200,000 translates a little bit better down at the bottom of my sheet where it says capital expenditures. That's, because I said way down at the bottom in the little gray line, it says in fiscal year 2022, this was considered contracted services.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Wait, I see at the bottom it says capital equipment. Is that what you mean?
There's right underneath capital equipment,
It says construction in progress.
and then the little bracketed statement.
It says CIP.
No, fiscal year 2022 contracted services. Does it not say that?
No, it
doesn't
says
make it
CIP.
Oh, okay. It should say that.
Well, I
The
can,
packet that I gave you on Monday, that's what it said.
Right. That's what, okay.
That's what.
Will that cause an
So-
issue at all since it doesn't say that in this line item?
No, this
No.
is my spreadsheet that I just use for calculation purposes
Right.
when I was forecasting things for this budget exercise.
so for clarity as well,
Yeah, it-
initially when we did initially when the 200,000 was put in, it was put in solely at that time for the splash pad. Of course, since that time, we learned that we had to put in the infrastructure in the parking lot. So the 200 that 200 is being used for that, and then there's going to be additional money next year, and that money will be used to put in the splash pad itself.
Okay, so I don't believe I have a copy of exactly what it is you're looking at. I'm referring to the planning sheets that I gave you on Monday. That's why I think we're not speaking the same language here.
It's in your email.
Oh, okay, got it. All right. Yeah. So that line item in my, my planning document that I provided indicates that should translate to the same line item as contracted services from fiscal year 2022.
I have a general question. Are the red lines new line items added? Or some of them
Again,
are-
I don't see what you see.
That's a good question. Let's see.
It could be, because I added a bunch of stuff that we have not historically budgeted for in recreation.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. Sorry, it took me a long time.
What was the answer?
Yes.
Yes, those are
Red
different
lines
line
and new
items.
They're line items that
New-
were added for
basically
this
new
year's
line
budget.
items, right.
In mine, they're kind of, they would have been a different color than red.
I'm not a fan of red here.
But it is, yes, that's correct.
I was like, I wondered that too.
I have another budget or another recreation question, unless anybody else. Okay. So we, in the hopes that we acquire the old senior center, where would the money for, I'm assuming it would probably come out of recreation or possibly, I'm not sure, but I'm assuming recreation. Where would the money for that project or whatever needs to be spent on that come out of?
So no, the actual money would be the levy money.
Only from the levy.
Well, no.
That's what I'm asking,
The-
like where
so
the others.
part of the plan is one of the ways that they kept the senior center operating is they received dues from many of the seniors.
Right, so that would mean that a line item after, if there is an acquirement of that building, there would then be line items added for receiving those funds and then, okay, so those would be added if and when.
Correct.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what I had here has
Right, because
zero
we
anything
haven't-
for
right,
anything
exactly.
senior related.
So we
yeah.
can't right, I get it. I was just curious. And then, where in the budget will the murals be paid for? I'm assuming it'd be,
Probably out of actually community development.
got it, I'll wait. I'm done on recreation then. Do you mean community environment? I mean,
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
you're fine, that's what I was
Senior
thinking.
levy, senior citizens.
So, this is my question. It may have been, I'm trying to write and.
Right.
But what's, so there's no general fund money that will go towards the building, the dollar building, the senior building?
At this point, no. I mean, it wasn't in 2022 because we didn't own the building. That was owned by the nonprofit.
But, and it's not built in 2023?
Not
Not
yet,
yet.
because we hadn't. Yeah, we couldn't
We
put it in
haven't-
as an
got it. I
anticipation.
understand.
Right.
Okay.
The only thing that you can, and it's not in there, as Ms. Anderson said, but the only thing that you could anticipate would be the levy money, the levy revenue. In the past, what we've done with the levy revenue is that as soon as it comes in, we just pay it out directly, so we don't really see it in our sense. It's basically an expense. It's a wash. We get the check in, we just turn around and pay it out. We paid it out, to the senior center.
Got
That
it.
was it.
Okay, with that, it is 7:26. I do have a very hard stop at 7:30. Do you want to take over notes? Do you guys want to end? Do you want to reschedule another time? What are we doing so I make sure that I am transitioning the right way? You guys can keep going, I just have to go.
But Ms. Underwood has to leave too, so I would, and we already have another meeting scheduled. Can we just draw a line?
Where's another line, where's our another meeting scheduled?
I thought we had one scheduled for the 29th also. We
Yeah.
don't?
I thought we did.
I thought we did. We don't?
We can,
Let's do that, the 29th then.
okay.
29th, what day of the week is that? I forgot.
Tuesday, I think.
The Tuesday?
All right.
All right.
29th. That's Tuesday.
Yep.
What time?
That's not
'Cause
fine.
I didn't schedule that. You did last
Well, we
month?
talked about holding both of those dates
Mentioned
in
two
case
dates.
this date wouldn't work.
I said, why couldn't we just have two meetings? Because we're going to need more than one meeting.
Right.
Oh,
And then
okay.
we said, okay, cool, we'll do that. So everybody worked for these dates and we all said yes.
And we're
Okay,
going to need more than two. We're not going to be done at the next one.
sure.
For the tickler, I guess we
29th.
left off at
So why don't we
restoration
do
of
this
them.
too, is you guys sit with the budget more. If you have questions for those department heads, I can actually have those department heads come back. You wanna do that?
In the meeting?
Yes,
Okay. So, what is that? I'm sorry, 11:29.
Stay here with
Did you give a time, or I don't remember giving a time.
no, we didn't.
The clock is almost right. That's a good thing.
Just, do you want to do 6:30 again?
It's good to look up and see
Yeah.
the clock, because that was driving me crazy.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll do 6:30 again.
Madam
Well, I
Chair,
will say this, I don't know what time that there are interviews that day. It might eliminate Mary Jo and I.
Well, let's just start at 7 instead.
Can we keep it at 6:30 if we need to move it
Yep,
to 7?
that's,
That
yeah,
works.
that's even better.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Okay, and
smart,
for
we
the
know.
record, Mr. Mosby checked with the law director. For these committee meetings, we don't have to have any formal kind of notification. So if you saw my text message, that's the reason I did that, and I'll do it again, just a reminder, and I'll send an
Committee
email.
budget meeting.
We don't, yeah, this is the committee meetings, we don't have to have any formal way, we just have to make sure that they're there.
You have to have a public notice.
Madam
still.
Chair, I just have a quick question.
We don't have to have a public notice?
We do, it's on the it's required to be on the calendar, and it was placed
Sure
on
we
the
do.
calendar.
It's an open meeting. We still have to have a public
Okay,
notice.
well, when I
There
read
was
the
a public
legislation.
notice. What Miss,
I saw an
she's
email
talking
about
about
it.
is she didn't need to put individual notices. to the
On our
residents.
doors.
Correct.
I got you.
Before we officially quit, can I just ask a quick question of the committee? If any of you have specific detailed questions for me that might require some research on my end, please feel free to email that to me directly ahead of time, and that way I can be sure to do my homework before the meeting on the 29th and be able to answer your questions and expedite the meeting.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the 29th is 6:30, I'll email myself.
All right, and we are adjourned.
Thank you, we are adjourned.